Good morning. Welcome to Facebook Live number 10 on sleep disorders. And these Facebook Lives are for outpatient clinicians, whether you're a physician, a primary care physician, psychiatrist, or if you're another type of healthcare practitioner, a therapist, or anyone who's working with patients who have sleep disorders. I'm just sharing some tidbits every day. It's been a few days. I was doing these daily, but then we're in Northern California and we lost power for about 30 hours. So we've got power now again. So I'm jumping back into these Facebook Lives. If you're in California, I hope you're staying safe through the storms and flooding. It's been pretty crazy with the winds and the amount of rain that we got. Thankfully, today it's nice and sunny and we do have power back on. So today we're talking about a memory hack for remembering sleep disorders. And I like this one. I used this one a lot when I was a med student and resident and a fellow as well, which is essentially using literary characters or fictional characters or celebrities to help you remember different disease states. So we're going to be talking about some, just a fun one, some characters that have sleep disorders, and you can have these in mind when you're working with patients just as a little trick to remember, like, oh, okay, maybe this is what narcolepsy looks like or something like that. So we're going to just be talking about a few examples of those today. If you have any that you want to share, please put them in the comments. I would love to hear your ideas and your additions to this list that I'm going to be sharing. I'm Dr. Nishi Bhopal. I'm a physician. I'm board certified in psychiatry and sleep medicine. I have additional training in integrative psychiatry. I have a YouTube channel and online courses teaching physicians and therapists about practical clinical sleep medicine. Next week, I'm going to be doing a free series of masterclasses on different supplements that can help your patients sleep. Supplements are not a solution to sleep disorders, but they can be very supportive. So we're going to be talking about a few different ones. And I see questions come up all the time about different supplements like magnesium and melatonin in physician Facebook groups. So I thought I'd put together a free training on how to use some of those supplements and other strategies to help your patients with sleep through an integrative lens, because so many of our patients are on sleep aids and many of them don't actually need those. So I'll put the link to the free masterclass in the comments if you want to check that out and sign up for that. Those are happening next week, February 13th, 14th, and then the week after on the 21st. So you can choose the time that works best for you. If you're joining me live, thank you. If you're watching the recording, please type replay in the comments so that I know you're watching. Let me know where you're joining from, what your specialty is. If you have any questions about sleep workup with your patients, what are some of your biggest challenges with treating sleep issues in your practice? I would love to hear from you. Okay, so today we're talking about literary and fictional characters that have sleep disorders, just so that you can use these as a memory hack when you're seeing patients with sleep issues. So how I got interested in this was when I was an undergrad student. I did my undergraduate degree in biology at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, which is where I'm from. My minor was actually English literature. I did enough courses to do a major, but at that time you couldn't do a double major in sciences and the arts. So I ended up having a major in general biology, and then I did a minor in English lit. But literature classes were my favorite. I just loved literature. I love reading. I still love reading. And I really enjoyed some of the depictions of medical conditions in literature. I remember reading Dickens, and there's a lot of descriptions of things like gout and obstructive sleep apnea. And in the Woodward Library at UBC, if any of you went to UBC, let me know in the comments. I'd love to connect with other alumni. At the Woodward Library, they had a historic collection of science and medical books in the Woodward Memorial Room. And I think the room has moved now, but it was this beautiful, lavish room. Like, you open these mahogany doors and there's this hush, and it's just paneled with, these beautiful bookshelves and leather furniture, and just kind of that sort of quintessential image that you might have of like a classic library. And they had different manuscripts, and they had some manuscripts from Darwin and things like this, so lots of historical books. And I just love sitting in there and kind of perusing through all this medical history. And literature is kind of like that. It's kind of like going back in time and learning about medical history. So I'm going to just share a few characters here from literature that can help you remember different sleep disorders. So we're going to start with Don Quixote, which is the main character in the book by its name, Don Quixote by Cervantes. And if you've read the book, let me know. it's kind of a fun one, right, to think about the condition REM behavior disorder, because famously Don Quixote, he was dreaming about cutting off a giant's head, and he sees blood rushing everywhere. And what was actually happening was he was acting out this dream, and there was a wineskin, like a bag of wine, behind his bed, and it was filled with red wine, and he slashed it while he was dreaming, and then the wine was gushing everywhere. So his brain assimilated that as blood, and he was chopping off a giant's head. So this is your depiction of REM behavior disorder. So you can ask patients about their dreams, about dream enactment. Do you ever find yourself kicking, flailing, screaming, thrashing in your sleep? Sometimes the patient themselves won't even know they're doing that, but the bed partner might report that. So that's a really quick question that you can ask people, and you can have this image of Don Quixote with his cutting up the giant's head with the wine skin gushing everywhere. You can have that in mind when you're thinking about REM behavior disorder. The next one I'm going to share is from Dickens, from the posthumous papers of Pickwick Club, the character Joe. And this character was morbidly obese. He would fall asleep everywhere he went. He'd be falling asleep, mouth open, snoring loudly, just sleeping all over the place. And so this is where the term Pickwickian syndrome came from. So if you are in internal medicine, you know, there's a lot of focus on obesity hypoventilation syndrome. I remember, I actually started my residency in internal medicine, and then I switched to psychiatry later, a year after that, after my intern year. But I remember learning about obesity hypoventilation syndrome, and they would call it Pickwickian syndrome. And I was like, oh, I know where that comes from. So this is a way to remember your patients who have obesity hypoventilation syndrome. And you can think about your obese patient, the one who's got excessive daytime sleepiness. Maybe they're falling asleep at inopportune times, or it could be potentially dangerous. They could be falling asleep while driving or doing other things like operating heavy machinery and things like this. So you can have this picture in mind when you're thinking about obesity hypoventilation syndrome. The next one I have on the list is Jabba the Hutt in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Okay, this isn't quite, literary character, but it's a fictional character. And if you remember the scene where there was the pod race and they were like racing all around in Tatooine, he was sound asleep during this very harrowing, action-packed race. And so this is a representation similar to the Pickwickian syndrome, but a little bit different. It's a representation of hypersomnia, secondary to obstructive sleep apnea. So it's kind of similar to the last example. So you can imagine this person who's in this very stimulating environment, and they're falling asleep everywhere. And, I've had patients tell me, I took my parent out to dinner and they were falling asleep. It's so embarrassing. And a lot of times people don't think anything of it. But this could be an indication of a sleep disorder, like sleep disordered breathing, including obstructive sleep apnea and obesity hypoventilation. Okay, the next character is the character Aurora in the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty. So many of you may be familiar with the Disney depiction of Sleeping Beauty. The original fairy tale was by Charles Perrault. Many of these fairy tales are, from hundreds of years ago, and then have been depicted in Disney films. So in the story, she sleeps for years on end, and then she's only awoken from the spell of hypersomnia by a kiss from the prince. And so this is where the other name for Klein-Levin syndrome, which is a type of hypersomnia, comes from. So Klein-Levin syndrome is also known as Sleeping Beauty syndrome. So this is quite a rare syndrome, and you get these cyclical episodes of hypersomnia. But you can think about this, I remember seeing patients who were complaining of excessive daytime sleepiness. They were sleeping these really long hours compared to their peers. Sometimes it's cyclical, sometimes it isn't. And oftentimes it just gets chalked up to, oh, they're just tired all the time, or they're sleepy all the time. But there actually could be an underlying sleep disorder like some form of a hypersomnia. So you can be on the lookout for this in your Sleeping Beauties. Okay, the next character is Macbeth in the play Macbeth by Shakespeare. So Shakespeare depicted a lot of different kinds of medical conditions in his writing. different kinds of sleep disorders. So this is a depiction of insomnia, and specifically a depiction of precipitating causes of insomnia, and then the psychological consequences that come from sleeplessness. So the precipitating cause in this case was murder, right? So of course, that's going to affect someone's ability to sleep if they do have any little bit of a conscience. And then the psychological consequences of that, of anxiety and depression and hallucinations and all kinds of things that can occur as a result of chronic sleeplessness. Okay, the next character, a little bit different, is this minor character in Seinfeld by the name of Emily. So this was the girlfriend of Kramer, and Kramer was complaining of being kicked during sleep by his girlfriend Emily because of her Jimmy legs. So this is a depiction of periodic limb movement disorder, where people have these leg movements throughout their sleep. And it's often disturbing to the bed partner. Sometimes the patient themselves doesn't realize that they are doing this. They may wake up feeling unrefreshed, tired. They're not sure why. They feel like they're getting enough sleep, yet they're still not feeling refreshed, or they have excessive daytime sleepiness, or they just can't get comfortable, or they're waking up through the night and they're not really sure why they're waking up. And then on a sleep study, you'll see these leg movements. They are literally what they sound like, periodic leg movements, that are sometimes then causing these disruptions in sleep. So you'll see these little awakenings across the hypnogram in the sleep study. And so that's a depiction of periodic limb movement disorder. So you can keep that one in mind, the Jimmy legs in mind, when you're thinking about patients who are complaining of unrefreshing sleep. Maybe they don't have sleep apnea, or it's a good idea to test them for that, because that can sometimes lead to these kinds of symptoms too. But keep this one in mind when you're seeing patients with these kinds of symptoms. And then the last one I'll share today is Alice from Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. So many of you are familiar with this story, which is told as this fantastical story where Alice goes down the rabbit hole and she meets all these really, otherworldly characters, like the Mad Hatter and the Cheshire Cat and the Queen of Hearts, and there's all kinds of bizarre things happening. And so this story is told as a dream that happens when she falls asleep under a tree. And at various points in the story, Alice knows that she's dreaming. And at the end, she said, "That's enough nonsense." And she wakes herself up at the end, knowing that this was all a dream. So can you guess what's sleep? Well, it's not really a sleep disorder, but what condition this is depicting? Well, it's lucid dreaming, when someone is aware of the dream and they even have a little bit of control over what's happening in their dream. So you can think about Alice in Wonderland when you are talking to your patients about lucid dreaming, or if you get questions about that. I know more and more patients these days are interested in sleep, and I'm getting more and more questions about lucid dreaming. I don't know if they're hearing about it on podcasts or from other sources, but you can think about Alice in Wonderland when you're discussing lucid dreaming. So that was just a fun little roundup of some fictional characters. If there's other ones that you want to add to the list, let me know in the comments below. Hopefully it's helpful just to get you thinking about different ways of remembering conditions and personifying them, because sometimes when you have a patient in front of you, it can be a little bit hard to tease things out. So I like to have these kinds of characters or archetypes in mind when I'm assessing patients, and it's just also kind of fun. You can talk to patients about it too, and talk to them about the Jimmy legs and Seinfeld and things like that, and it's fun for them to relate to that. In my YouTube video this week, I'm going to be talking about some celebrities with sleep disorders, just another little memory hack. So you can stay tuned for that. That's going to come out later this week. So I'll put the link to the Sleep Supplements Masterclass in the comments below. I'd love to see you there. It's a live masterclass. So I'll be there. I'll be delivering the presentation live, and then you'll be able to ask me questions. I'm also going to share information about my clinical sleep kit program, which is opening up next week. I'd love to welcome you into the program. We have an amazing cohort of physicians, but you can come to the live masterclass, learn about sleep supplements, and then you can ask questions about the clinical sleep kit program if you're interested in learning more about what that is all about and what to expect. So I'll put the link below. In the meantime, you can also grab my free sleep mini course at intrabalance.com/doctors. I'll put that in the link as well in the comments. And then you can follow my page to know when I'm going to be going live next. That's all for today. Bye for now.